Welcome back. So we meet again. Now that we are entering into the 19th century literature, a lot of which is reacting to the Enlightenment, things will be spooky in places. Or not, maybe by our contemporary standards. Either way, the person we'll be looking at today is Washington Irving. A lot of people know him from Legend of Sleepy Hollow and also from Rip Van Winkle. And those are the two short stories that I had you read. A little bit of background info on him. Come on. Well, he was heavily influenced by Joseph Addison, Shakespeare, Lawrence Sterne, and Oliver Goldsmith. So three really important, vivid English writers, and Goldsmith, an Anglo-Irish writer with a vivid imagination as well. One of the things that's really important about him is that he's the first American writer of the 19th century to really have an audience outside of the US in a big and bold way. He spoke to people in different parts of the reading world through his writing and provided a vision of America in a way that wasn't really available to people back then. And one of the things he's also very well known for is he's widely seen as one of the most important early creators of the modern short story. And I think you might be able to say even that he is the originator for the American short story. For the English or British short story, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back on that. So I don't know if the English language short story would quite fare in the same way. Now, one of the things he's also really known for is this book called The Sketchbook. And the Sketchbook is basically a travel diary where he builds these sketches of different places and peoples. And what he does is describe them in such vivid detail that people want to read all about these people and places. Because travel was still prohibitively expensive for most people, reading about distant, faraway places and the people there is the way that people could travel without actually moving. I know that's a phrase from Dune and, the travelers who consume the spice, but I don't mean that kind of traveling without moving. Just that, literature, the written word, was a way that people got to learn about these places. And anyway, the sketchbook looms large within that genre. And it influences people like Nathaniel Hawthorne, which we'll be looking at next, also Henry Longfellow, a fairly important poet, and even Herman Melville. So he's really, really rippled across the American and the global imagination in a very big and meaningful way. Now, one of the reasons that he is so beloved and so well read in his time is that, once again, he's talking about places that do exist and the newness of them. People are, innately curious about America and what it is and what it means, as the ashes and the embers of the revolution die down. And you'll remember, looking at your discussion for this week, I'm asking you to think about how do we draw that line between colonial literature on one side and American literature. How does America grow into itself as its own cultural and literary entity? And once again, talking about things that are American are that. Sleepy Hollow, real place. In New York. It still has colonial era gravestones from before the Revolution, but there's also the Old Dutch Church, and that is what is referred to in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So again, it's got an anchor in geography. And one of the things you'll probably notice when you read through it, if you haven't read through it already, is that he does spend a lot of time building up what Tarrytown is like, what the people are like who live there, how it's at this very lazy bend of the river. And these are all really important, vivid elements that help immerse the reader in the story. Not only is there a sense of geographical place and time in the legend of Sleepy Hollow, there's also a sense of it being a place that is rich with its own lore already. And this sense of it being part of a larger body of legend is made pretty clear early on, because even though Irving wrote Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the author of the story is the late Diedrich Knickerbocker. And, Knickerbocker is another name for New Yorker. But what you also have to think about here is that he is inventing this character who is telling this story. So it's even one place farther removed already. So this sense of it being accurate or being able to be pinned down just isn't going to fly. And I'm going to start dropping some ideas in your head about how this kind of is moving against the idea of Enlightenment thinking. There is no observable origin. There is no way to pin things down rationally or reasonably with this kind of layered story structure from person to person to person to person. So in a way, it's going to have this fantastical sense to it that moves beyond reason and moves beyond the rational portions of our mind being able to pin it down for what it is or what it is not. Really important stuff. Couple of notes you should keep in mind while you're reviewing the story. On page 42, we get right into the dominant spirit, the Headless Horseman. And rumor is that he is the ghost of a Hessian trooper. Now, Hessian just means a person from the Hesse area or region of Germany. Strictly speaking, we're talking about a mercenary here. So if you think about it in that way, the revolution is over, but there are ghosts of the revolution around, right? That too is something that cannot be reasonably pinned down. The whole idea of spirits and haunting is directly opposed to these notions of what the Enlightenment is, right? If you cannot see it, if multiple people cannot see it at the same time and share and agree upon their observations, it can't be real. Now, Hessian, again, I know it was a word that has other popular meanings. Back in my day, in the 80s, it was another word for a dude with long hair who was really into heavy metal. I don't know how Germany became like this kind of originary point for different musical trends in the English-speaking world. The Goths too have an origin from Germanic tribes that go all the way back to the Roman Empire, and they didn't wear all black. That's not a thing for them. So go figure that. We get a wonderful description of Ichabod Crane right there on page 43, and what you're going to notice about Irving is that he's a master of description. They're lush, they're long, they're extremely detailed and immersive. And in fact, you could say that these descriptive set pieces of people, of places, of food dishes really take the centerpiece of the story. The actual plot is, it's really tiny and short, but it's all this other stuff that occupies so much space and which is so memorable. So this is on page 43. That second full paragraph, about halfway down. The cognomen, that means the surname or the last name of Crane, was not inapplicable to his person. He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long sniped nose, so that it might have been mistaken for a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius. Here, genius means the representation of the spirit of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. Not a flattering description at all, but you know, Irving's all about the descriptions. So, given how much this story is still in the popular imagination, oh God, that's my doorbell ringing. Hold just a second. All right, sorry about that interruption. Arrest warrant, whatever. Anyway, what I was saying was, it's such a popular story and has been told so many times and in so many different media that we get different representations of it, and if of Ichabod Crane. Some of you might remember this one from the preposterously inaccurate Tim Burton version of Sleepy Hollow with the ever handsome and high cheekboned Johnny the Depp in the starring role. Doesn't sound much like the description. I don't have time to go off on the rant. Nah. I won't waste your time with that. Here, you're going to see something that's a lot more representative of what he looks like going back to the original text. And this, of course, is from the Disney animated short, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which has been around for a good 60 years now. I know the quality of it is really bad. Sorry about that. But you know how stingy Disney is with its images. Just too much. But even in what might be considered high American art, we do see representations as well. This is Ichabod Crane, as painted by Norman Rockwell in 1937, known for his very quaint paintings of Americana for the magazine Saturday Evening Post. Now, even here, you get the sense of the lankiness and a little bit of the nose, but he still looks, I don't know, somewhat admirable and not quite, worthy of the scorn that we learn that he is of when we read the short story. So we get a lot about that. We find out that he also likes to use the rod on the students and that he's a bully. He really takes it out on the strong little kids, the little brom bones in training. And a lot of this goes on for quite a while. What we do also learn that even though he is this school teacher, he is extremely superstitious. And they even reference Cotton Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World as a history that he reads. So once again, we're getting that Puritan dripping back into American lit. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it's trickling down into a piece of literature that is pretty much opposed to the Enlightenment mindset of how the world works and of how the mind works. Now, the other thing that we really need to be take care to look for are these long, beautiful passages of farm animals, such as on page 47. And also like the food that's coming along with it. He's really excited about getting to go to the Van Tassels for dinner. Wonderful passage on the bottom, page 47, where he's fantasizing about all this food that will be at the Van Tassels house. The roasting pig with a pudding in its belly and an apple in its mouth, all these ducks and dishes, bacons, hams, all kinds of birds, etc. Now notice all of these help describe what can be seen as the bounty of America at this time, the success of its agriculture and its animal husbandry. Maybe this is their version of this 19th century version of food porn. We have the Food Network now and all those cooking shows, but back then it's just people describing all these gorgeous things. We'll leave it at there. We'll do part 2 in just a second.